Exploring facilitators' capacity to successfully implement mindfulness-based programs in schools. I'm Stephen Samrock. I'd like to start by thanking my advisor, Dr. Marquez Lewis, for her invaluable insight throughout this process and for motivating me to do my best. Scholars, governments, and the media are increasingly acknowledging primary and secondary schools' responsibility to supporting pupils' mental well-being. The field is working toward developing feasible and effective programs and early intervention systems in schools. Within this climate, there is a growing movement toward school-based programs and interventions with mindfulness methods as a key component. Right now, the scientific community is definitely paying attention to mindfulness. We're seeing researchers from different areas of psychology drawing out the various benefits of mindfulness. And these outcomes have overwhelmingly been tested and found in adult populations, but dovetailing from this evidence is the growing enthusiasm for bringing mindfulness to youth in schools. These figures are from a 2015 systematic review, and they show that the volume and pace of scholarly interest in mindfulness is steadily increasing. The investigation of mindfulness in youth is still marginal, but quickly on the rise. Notably, only 1%, 36, of these studies examined mindfulness in youth in school settings. This quote by Felver and Jennings accurately sums it up, that mindfulness research is often described as being in its infancy, and if this is the case, then the study of mindfulness with youth and in schools is in the prenatal stage of development. When we look more closely at the existing literature, early as it may be, we begin to notice trends in how this topic is being studied. What we see on the left is when researchers examine a certain school-based mindfulness program, these are the aspects or components of the program itself that they tend to report. On the right, we see the types of program outcomes that studies are assessing. So we're seeing a lot of the what is the content of these programs being implemented in schools. We're seeing the why, which helps provide the empirical justification for bringing these programs to youth in school settings. What the field is paying less close attention to is the how. How and to what degree of quality are programs being implemented? There is a dearth of evidence here. For example, fewer than 6% of studies on this topic analyzed program adherence as an aspect of rigor. But when you read the discussion sections in the research, you begin to see a growing sentiment that this is a key issue, and it's time for the emerging field to begin taking implementation factors more seriously. In this study, I'm really zooming in on factors pertaining to program facilitators. So we're talking about how individual facilitators are influencing the quality of implementation in the classroom. In exploring why the facilitator plays such a crucial role, social cognitive theory is my grounding. Originally coined as social learning theory by Albert Bandura, this theory explores how a child's basic learning process is powerfully affected by observing, and children learn new behaviors by observing others, i.e., through others' modeling behavior. Initially, Bandura explored the social modeling of aggression and found that preschool children were likely to imitate aggressive behavior. For this study, I explore the possibility that school children are likely to imitate mindful behavior and how this connects to program implementer qualities. School-based mindfulness program instructor capacity relative to successful implementation is the independent variable. Right now, There is no centralized, standardized regulation or credentialing for teaching mindfulness in schools. But we do have some insights from the scholarly literature about what factors are important. Program facilitators' personal characteristics, such as personal awareness of their emotional and social needs and competencies, are contextual factors that may affect the intervention process. We know that personal mindfulness practice leads to ability to embody mindfulness, and therefore may affect ability to model and teach it effectively. The role of the individual who is delivering the program, for example, is it a school teacher who's based in the classroom, or is it an external instructor who's visiting? This may be a significant factor impacting outcomes. Self-efficacy, how confident do providers feel in their ability to do what is expected? And last but not least, skilled proficiency, how competent are facilitators in delivering these types of programs? These are both shown to be key factors in program implementation. Implementation quality is essentially the degree to which an intervention is conducted as it was originally intended. So, again, not talking about the content of the program itself, this is focusing on the process of its delivery. And there is strong, credible support that the level of implementation does affect program outcomes, and that effective implementation is associated with better outcomes. As for research on implementation in school-based programs, this here is a model from a report for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and we can see the wide range of contextual factors that may affect the intervention process in school-based programs. Again, for my research, really zeroing in on factors related to facilitators like quality of delivery, implementer characteristics, and implementer readiness. As for research on implementation of these types of mindfulness programs in schools, studies are not typically reporting data pertaining to quality of implementation, much less are they analyzing it as a mediating variable to explain program outcomes. But it's repeatedly discussed theoretically as an important issue in terms of drawing conclusions and understanding the impact of these programs. Program instructors are arguably the most integral component to a program's implementation. This study explores implementer qualities in depth as an active ingredient of the program itself and as a potential driver of effects and viability. The hypothesis is that these facilitators' classroom role, experience practicing mindfulness, embodiment of mindfulness, training, and credentials are considerable factors affecting successful program implementation. In this study, I collect qualitative narrative content about opinions toward and lived experiences of planning, researching, and carrying out school-based mindfulness programs. I will use semi-structured, in-depth interviews to collect data. I will recruit one participant from each of the following 4 populations: school teachers who have implemented mindfulness programs in their own classrooms, visiting instructors who are not based in schools, program developers who create the content and deliver training, researchers who are actively examining this field. The participant pool is via the Mindfulness in Schools project online members network. This is the organization I trained with last summer, which is why I have access to the network. And MISP is a UK-based charity which develops curricula and offers training to schools and teachers. The recruitment process involves emailing contacts from the MISP teacher network, collecting survey responses to confirm eligibility, and then confirming the audio interview appointment by email. There will be an initial email explaining the study's purpose and directing readers to a Google survey which confirms study eligibility. A follow-up email will confirm the appointment time and their preferred telephone number. They will also receive an attached informed consent document in the follow-up email. And this study collects qualitative data through interviews, and I will use a semi-structured interview guide. Digital audio recording files, transcripts, and memos are all kept in a password-protected Google Drive folder. The telephone interviews are recorded, and once the audio connection is established, I read the opening statement, and then we proceed with the interview. The interview guide includes questions pertaining to these topics: facilitator's role, process components, training, experience, mindfulness practice, personal characteristics, attitudes and belief, and modeling. After the interview, I read the debriefing statement, recapturing the study purpose, thanking the participant, and offering time for questions. I use a qualitative content analysis to systematically analyze the interview transcripts. First, the data must be prepared, so digital interview recordings are completely transcribed. Next, I build mutually exclusive categories and subcategories to create the coding frame. Structuring is the process of creating main categories, and the categories are structured in a concept-driven way, so they're predetermined prior to the research. Here is a table of the main categories outlined, and as you can see, they directly reflect the topics in the interview guide. So, after structuring the main categories comes generating, and this is when subcategories are generated from the data. So, combing through each passage to identify subcategories. Next, I must define the scope of each main category and subcategory. The analysis itself involves dividing the material into units based on thematic criterion. So essentially, one unit corresponds to one theme, and each unit fits into exactly one subcategory of the coding frame. So each unit is mutually exclusive. And the units of coding are consecutively numbered, and they're entered into a coding sheet. And then I keep my reasons for segmenting materials into units in memos. Ultimately, I present the findings qualitatively, and it comes in the form of a coding frame that has been detailed and illustrated through quotes in text matrices. Here's just one example of how qual results of a content analysis have been shown through a quote matrix. Feel free to pause the video and have a closer look. And here are my references. Thank you.